but I know we need a little time to chat, and we're live, and we got a lot to say. Welcome everybody. It's great to be with you. Tom Ackerman here in our KMOX studios. We have a panel that has a lot to say and a lot to cover. We yesterday all watched the press conference involving, from left to right, Bill DeWitt III, Bill DeWitt Jr., John Mozeliak, Chaim Bloom, Busch Stadium, to lay out their plan for 2025 and beyond. And as you can imagine, it received a widespread reaction, including right here in this group. Bernie Miklasz, Matt Pauley, Kevin Wheeler, Tom Ackerman, we're with you. Bernie, let's go right to you. Let's get your initial reaction. And I know you've had some time to absorb this, what you witnessed yesterday as Chaim Bloom, it was announced, will succeed John Mozeliak, but not until 2026. He gets a 5-year deal.
I thought that the Cardinals obviously took a necessary step. I think they've been putting this off for too long. Obviously, there was a deterioration, a decaying of their minor league player development system, which is part of their franchise heritage. So I was surprised they allowed that to happen. But at least they recognize, we have to fix this thing, and we have to do it with a lot of resources, and we have to do it fast. And to me, they hired the right guy, Chaim Bloom, to do that because that's his specialty. He's excellent at it. So I was really encouraged that they took that step. We can fuss about whether Chaim Bloom should have taken over right away. Maybe John Mozeliak move into the background. That's their decision. I've been outspoken about what I felt they should have done, but they've made their decision. And I appreciate John Mozeliak's candor yesterday, where he basically interjected and said, no, it probably means our payroll's going down. And that's the question I have, and I know all of you will sound off on this. Are Cardinals fans ready for a rebuild? Not a teardown, not blowing it all up, but kind of a moderate rebuild, because I do call it a rebuild. I have no reason to avoid that word. What will be the appetite for that if fans know that at least they're moving in a new direction? Is it going to happen soon enough to make them happy? That's just one of the questions that's out there, and we don't know the answer today.
What did you think, Kevin? Your thoughts?
A lot like Bernie, not surprisingly. Couple things that stand out to me when it comes to the reaction, right? When they say the payroll's coming down, they didn't specify that it's coming down 10 million, 50 million, 80 million. We have no idea. So I think my counsel to Cardinals fans is don't overreact to that until you see how much it is. If the payroll's down 10 million, that's nothing. That's no big deal. That's what you spent on Lance Lynn. You can get by without a Lance Lynn. That's not a big deal. Secondly, I don't think that this means they're going to be worse next year. I mean, a lot of the salary that's going to go away are guys that either didn't contribute or produced at numbers below what you're paying them to do. So this doesn't automatically mean a step back in terms of your won-loss record next year. And if you're doing things smarter, like playing Luke and Baker against lefties, you can actually be a better offensive team and score a few more runs. And you might get something from a young guy like Michael McGreevy or maybe eventually Quinn Matthews that's going to be higher end than a 38-year-old pitcher who doesn't miss bats. So I want to temper the reaction, right? I think that it's a fair criticism that I share that we need to hear more from Chaim Bloom. One of the things the fan base desires, desperately desires, is a different voice. That has nothing to do with whether or not Bloom's going to be amazing. And Mo jokes about it. He knows the fans are tired of hearing him. So maybe start that transition. But I thought not making Bloom available for interviews after the press conference is a mistake. I think he needs to be more of a face if you want to sell fans. If you don't care about selling fans, do what you want.
I don't think there's any doubt. My initial reaction on Twitter was that Chaim Bloom was a breath of fresh air, and I do think they need to get him out in front as often as possible. Matt, you were there. You had some great interviews with John Mozeliak, Bill DeWitt III, that are available right now on our website. Give me your initial thoughts.
Yeah, a couple things. First off, I think Kevin's point about how much payroll is going to go down. They can do one of two things. They got to stop giving money to middle-level players. With all due respect to Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, those positions on the team need to go to produce talent, low money talent. So if the way they're reducing payroll is by not having Lance Lynn and not having Kyle Gibson and having Michael McGreevy and Gordon Graceffo instead in those spots, that I don't think they take much of a step back. If the way they drop payroll is by trading Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras and Nolan Arenado, then that is a completely different situation, and it makes the team worse. So we got to sit here and wait and see what the lowering of payroll actually looks like. To the point about Chaim Bloom, I was also disappointed that he didn't do one-on-one interviews and didn't spend more time. I've had the opportunity to talk with him just personally a handful of times since he came on, and I find him to be incredibly compelling. You know, one story about it, I met him in spring training. I went up to him like every other media member went up to him just to introduce myself. I had the typical 45-second conversation with him. Next time I see him, hey, Matt, how's it going? How's your family? Like, he remembered all these things. He is so personable. He's so interesting. I think he's a really compelling character in all of this, and I do think the Cardinals would be smart to put that on display.
Well, I agree, and I had one chat with him. It was down in spring training, and it was a nice long chat. And boy, I mean, his mind, he was just everywhere, and he was very interested in St. Louis as a market. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Matt. I think that he is going to be someone that, as people get to know, they're really going to appreciate. And Bernie, I wanted to toss back to you one more thing about the actual press conference itself, and then we'll get into this future and what it's all looking like. But, you know, I just passed someone in the hallway on my way in here, and I said, how's it going? They're like, I'm just bummed out about the Cardinals. And I'm like, you know, this is supposed to be the start of this new era. And I do think it had a lot to do with how it looked yesterday, the optics of yesterday. You had Chaim with his, you know, bright future and well-spoken, and you had a lot of the same talking points coming from Bill the Third, and Mo. And, you know, it does create, I think, that, oh no, you know, they're not changing thing from the fans. You know, when I looked at it, and some of the things they said weren't wrong. I mean, winning 83 games is an improvement over last year, but you can't try to sell the fans that that's exciting or that is why you should be going to the ball game. I just felt like the connection with the fan base has to improve, and I did not see that in the press conference yesterday.
No, I respect that opinion very much, Tom. I do agree. If I could go back, I do agree with what Matt said about they needed to have Chaim Bloom more front and center. Kevin Wheeler agreed with that too. We all agree with that. I thought it was like unfortunate the way they sort of ushered him out of there as soon as the main press conference was over. And let me just add to this. The Cardinals don't need my advice, but let's be totally honest here. One of the things the Cardinals have failed at miserably is messaging. They're just not very good at it. In fact, it's stunning at this day and age. Now, you can take the worst sports franchise of the 5 major sports in North America, and even the worst franchises are like great at messaging. It shouldn't be as hard, but they have a hard time with it. So my advice to them, not that they need it or want it, is that the work that Chaim Bloom is going to be doing in 2025 is extremely important to the future of the franchise. It is extremely important. And it's best if you want fans to understand what you're trying to do, what your objectives are, why it will be better, why this will lead to a better team. You will come through this much better off for the future. You need to have him not constantly. He can't stay underground next season. Well, he's working on the minor league stuff. You need to bring your fans into the loop about what exactly he's doing and why, and also to offer progress reports, because they're going to be doing some fantastic things. And I think most fans would be enthused about the changes because they understand that it will lead to better days and it'll get back to the Cardinals' strength, which they allowed to become a weakness: player development, technology, all this stuff, analytics. So they can't keep Chaim Bloom out of the limelight all of next season. He needs to be front and center talking about, hey, we just did this, we just did that, we just hired 20 people. You know, you got to bring the fans into the loop. And this isn't like you're trying to sell them. It's not a cynical thing. It's just good business. And also you're treating your fans like adults. You're treating them with respect. You're important to us. So we're going to tell you exactly what we're doing, what Chaim Bloom is up to every step of the way. He will be available to the media. You will see a lot of him. He will take you step by step exactly what they're doing. Like if they keep that in the dark, I don't know what to say. I mean, I can't believe that, frankly, they would be that dense. I got to assume that they'll do this. If you want people to buy into this, you got to tell them what they're buying into. You got to tell them why it's a good thing, and you have to back it up with details. So I wanted to get that part out there. He can be a valuable asset to sort of getting people to believe that, okay, I get it now, and I think we're going to be okay. I think they're going to be better off because of this. But that's not going to happen if you don't want to put him in front and center, because of some territorial things or whatever. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll
no
shut
question.
up now.
And Kevin, there was like no mention at all the entire time, and it was a short press conference, but there was no mention of Ali Marmol like once. Not I mean,
Right.
is he not going to be the manager of this movement? I don't understand that either.
There's a lot I didn't understand from yesterday. I think the overall idea of what they're doing is right. It makes sense, right? They need it. It's going to be critical for long-term success. Completely on board with bringing in new voices like Chaim Bloom, hiring new people for scouting and player development. All with it. It works. It's a good idea. What I thought was weird yesterday, in addition to what you just brought up, and in addition to what Bernie brought up, is that they tried to thread this needle where, well, we didn't do anything wrong. We just need to catch up. Well, falling behind is doing it wrong.
Right.
Like, where was the saying? Where was this is what fans want. Okay. This is not what Wheeler wants. Wheeler doesn't care. But what fans want to hear is why. They want to know, why did you allow this? Why didn't you keep up? Why didn't you get into the front end on the technology stuff? Why didn't you get into the front end of the newer ways of training pitchers, or, different ways to get hitters right when they're struggling? Why do you have to catch up? I would love to know it, but that I don't matter. I'm just an opinion guy on the radio. I'm not the one that they have to sell season tickets to. If I'm a season ticket holder, you saying we know that we messed up, we fell in love too much with what we did before, we resisted change, but now we see that was wrong. That goes a long way with fans. I mean, think about your own personal relationships. When you screw up, does it really work with the people around you if you don't acknowledge that you screwed up?
No,
It doesn't.
Not.
of
It
course
doesn't.
not.
No. So I thought that was missing yesterday. I thought that the DeWitts and Mo should have at least said, look, we got too, you don't even have to put it in a negative way. We just believed too much in what we had always done, and we missed it. And now we realize it, and this is why we're changing. But there was none of that. It was just, oh, no, we just need to catch up. Well, you fell behind for a reason, and fans know it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you just can't change them. They still are champions. You can't take it away. They won championships together. We all know that. Like they won. They're a winning franchise for a long time. But we also have seen it for ourselves. And gosh, Chaim Bloom said it throughout his opening remarks that if you rest on your laurels, you will get beat. Those were his exact words.
Yeah.
That if you, over the last decade, that things have moved very fast. That was directly at the Cardinals over the last decade that they have not. I mean, Matt, I think that was pretty clear too. We had a question on here. Matt, you were talking a lot about Bloom. So let's get into Bloom a little bit, because I think part of our job also is to educate, and we've all done our research on Chaim Bloom, because there's already a comment on here I see from Frank on Facebook. Why does Bloom have a bright future? Let's talk about Chaim Bloom a little bit and what we know about him.
Yeah, so I look more at his time in Tampa than I do Boston. I think he had a meddling owner in Boston that didn't allow him to do his job there. So let's evaluate this guy on what he did in Tampa. And he built a player development system, or he was part of a group of people that built a player development system that created high-end talent, that used technology, that used data, that used analytics, that allowed the organization to tell players how to be the best version of themselves. And they won a lot at Tampa with a low payroll. If he can do in St. Louis even half of what he did or 60% of what he did in Tampa, it's a very different situation. I've been thinking about this a lot because in baseball, you have the Tampas and the Milwaukees that produce a lot of high-end talent out of their minor league system, but they don't supplement it with big-time signings. And then you have teams like the Dodgers, who are very good at developing players, but they also spend gobs and gobs and gobs of money. There's not a lot of teams out there that are incredibly smart, incredibly good at developing players and have a respectable payroll where you're able to go out and spend legit money on guys that can come in. And that's what I'm hoping for the Cardinals here, that they're able to have most of their roster as homegrown type players, but they're still able to keep payroll at a certain level where you're able to bring in players to fill holes. And when I look at Bloom, I look at Tampa and I say this is a great opportunity for the Cardinals to get back to producing talent. He understands technology. He understands data. He understands all of these things. He's an incredibly smart person, and that's what excites me about him being part of the organization.
Bernie, I already got it on Twitter back at me. Like, well, he failed in Boston. Yeah,
No, he didn't.
He traded Mookie Betts. No,
he didn't.
That's not what happened. Tell me about Boston.
I just I'm kind of cranky about all this stuff because people are looking at the Red Sox record while he was there. Oh, that's the end of the story. He was a total failure. Yeah, okay. First of all, they brought the man in because John Henry, the owner of the team, who changes his mind like, I don't know, every 16 seconds roughly. He said, listen, we want that Tampa Bay model. What you people have done down there is extraordinary. Not just the overall player development system and your expertise there, but you're way ahead of everyone with the use of analytics. You're way ahead of everyone with technology. You're way ahead of everyone for understanding you can sign a pitcher, for example, for $5 million, who's going to be just as good, if not better, than someone you spend $15 million on. We want that model because it isn't that we don't want to spend money, but we got to become more efficient. So he took the job. He started in on his work that he was hired to do. And then they moved the goalposts. Sorry to mix sports. It's just like all of a sudden, because Boston's a fierce media market. The fans are very nasty when they're not happy. It's just like, well, wait a minute. Look, we're not winning. How come we didn't sign this guy? How come we're not spending? And it made John Henry nervous. And all of a sudden, when Mookie Betts, for example, turned down a pretty generous contract offer, it obviously wasn't going to be the ultimate offer. John Henry told Chaim Bloom, trade him. Everyone knew that, and then the Red Sox not only had to trade Mookie Betts, but they lost leverage in the trade talks because everyone knew what was going on. Then one thing I hear people that are uninformed talk about, well, how could they let Xander Bogaerts out of there? Well, first of all, look at the Xander Bogaerts contract in San Diego, and you tell me if that was a good idea. It's a horrendous contract, okay? But he didn't have any power to re-sign Xander Bogaerts. They weren't going to spend the money on him. But the thing that he was brought in to do before they screwed the guy, was put together a great farm system. And he wasn't even there that long. But with the changes he made in their farm system and their player development system, they went from having one of the worst farm systems in the majors for quite some time. At mid-season, Baseball America ranked them third in the major leagues, and MLB Pipeline has them way up there. So the thing that they hired him to do, he did. And because the owner is fickle and changes his mind every minute, that doesn't mean that Chaim Bloom is a failure. He did really exceptional work with the assignment that he was given. And if people want to be closed-minded to that, go ahead. I don't have to join you because I've done a lot of research on this guy, and I'm convinced. Well, what do the Cardinals need? If you don't like Chaim Bloom, if you don't think that he makes sense or what's so great about him, let me ask you a question. See, I'm getting fired up now. Let me ask you a question. Did you like what Jeff Luhnow did for the Cardinals? Did you like that? Bill DeWitt hires this guy. Well, what's he doing hiring a guy out of the corporate business world? He's not a baseball guy. Because Bill DeWitt, to his total credit, said, hey, baseball's going in a different way. We got to change our model. We can't do it like this. we've got to have, in the great Cardinal tradition, we have got to have a thriving, blooming farm system. Homegrown players always on the way. We've gotten away from that. And then once you have your own self-sustaining system and an efficient payroll, then you can go out and add big salary players to that. And so he brought Jeff Luhnow in, and the Jeff Luhnow era in St. Louis was a smashing success. So the people that are talking about, well, I don't understand it, blah, 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 blah. He only finished 5 games above 500 in Boston. If you liked what Jeff Luhnow did, you should love the fact that they've brought in Chaim Bloom, because it's basically the same thing they're trying to repeat. So it's not that complicated. No, my friends, it ain't that complicated. If you like Luhnow, you should like this hire.
And Kevin, if you want
use of the term blooming farm system, by the way.
There you go. Oh, I didn't even realize that. There you go.
And
that's right.
The Hall of Fame writer.
The baby birds are back. No, but I wanted to say that the biggest example to me of the failure of this player development system, all you have to do is look at the Cardinals starting rotation. Take Palante out because he's the addition that saved them for a little while, but the whole thing's free agent patches. Miklasz, Matz, Gray, Lynn, Gibson. You can't have it, Kevin. And Bloom's expertise, how he made his name in Tampa, was finding players too. But he was like lauded as like the expert when it came to bringing pitchers in and developing them.
Yeah, and look, we all have talked about this. Who is the last Cardinals homegrown prospect? We won't count Palante because as of right now, he looks like he's a piece for next year. But before Palante, even if we're generous and count him, who's the last homegrown starting pitcher that they kept that actually stuck around and was decent or good? And it was Jack Flaherty. He debuted 7 years ago. He's already in his second crack at free agency coming up this offseason. So if it takes 7 years to have one of your homegrown guys stick in your rotation as a quality guy, that's a problem. And when we go back to what you were talking about, Bernie, when we go back to, wait, hold up, you're there. When we go back to talking about the Luhnow way and what the Cardinals did so well, you go back to those years, it was a new guy every other year that was not only in the rotation, but a quality impact guy. It was Lance Lynn, Carlos Martinez. It was Jack Flaherty. It was Michael Wacha. It was Jaime Garcia. Now,
all those great relievers too. Yeah.
Yes. And they didn't all have great 10-year runs with the Cardinals, but they all had at least 3 or 4 year runs where they were top end guys, not fifth starters. Carlos Martinez, for a period, maybe it was only 2 or 3 years, but he was a top 10 or 11 starter in the National League. That's what they have to get back to that. And maybe Quinn Matthews will be the first in that new wave of those guys. But that has to start happening again because that was what fueled the success. Because you want to be able to bring in Sonny Gray, right? Sonny's the one we all agree, like that's the guy you go sign, right? You want to bring in Goldie. You want to bring in Arenado when you need him. But you want to stop filling in with, as you guys put it so well, the expensive mid-level free agents. That's where you go to die when you're going to be bringing in a bunch of those guys.
Absolutely. And, and you have to be able to, Matt, have instruction down in the minor leagues. You know, the Dodgers, I know, get a ton of attention for having the $300 million payroll and buying whoever they want. You know what else they buy? Instructors. Their minor league system is loaded with excellent instruction, and it absolutely starts there. And that's part of what Chaim Bloom is going to do. Pathways to success for players absolutely must have it, but you also have to have them ready to go once they get to this level.
Exactly. So I spent 10 years working in the minor leagues. I was with 3 organizations. I was with the Rockies, I was with the Royals, and I was with the Brewers. And in all of my stops, there was always 1 or 2 coordinators in town. You know what's a failure? The fact that Jordan Walker went to AAA Memphis and they didn't have a roving outfield guy there every single day with him, just camped out working with him. Walker regressed defensively from where we saw him early in the season to when he came back. They don't have these roving guys. They got like 5 in the organization as opposed to the 12 to 20 that most organizations have. If you've got somebody that goes somewhere that needs work in a specific area, you got to get somebody there, camp them out with them, and work them. Walker's gotten great work with Willie McGee when he's been at the big league level. but there's nobody like that that's available to just go there. So yes, they have to do better. And another thing that not a lot of people talk about, look at the Cardinals major league staff. Look at Ollie, look at Pop, look at Stubby. These are all guys who are really, really good minor league coaches or minor league managers. When those guys get to the big leagues, has that level of minor league instruction and minor league development been replaced at the minor league level? I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm totally locked in on every single manager and coach and outfield or every coordinator that's down there, but I will tell you they need to do better in terms of instruction.
And numbers are very important. Analytics, I know, Bernie, all of us have been around the game a long time, and we've all adopted analytics and understand them and follow them. It's not everything, but it's a huge part of the game. I know that some of our fellow fans, older fans, grouse and say, that's not part of the game. Bernie, the young guys coming up, that's their life. That's what they know from the beginning of playing, isn't it?
Yeah, people listen. First of all, people can grouse about what they want. I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I don't have to agree with it. However, if you don't like analytics and you're down, well, I'm tired of all these analytics. First of all, there's always been analytics. They just weren't called analytics. I grew up in Baltimore following Earl Weaver. He was this whole Moneyball thing. He was about 35, 40 years ahead of his time. Okay, platoon matchups, all this, many different lineups. No one who followed the Orioles in those days was complaining about Earl Weaver with his matchups and his all his different lineups, right? Or the way he used relievers. His emphasis on base percentage and home runs and defense and pitching. But he didn't have a fancy title. It was just Earl Weaver baseball. You don't think Whitey Herzog used analytics? Are you kidding? I'd sit in his office and watch him. It was done in a rudimentary way because you didn't have the advanced technology. He'd sit there hour after hour after hour, handwriting spray charts, but they were beautiful. They were it was like artwork. He knew exactly where the opponents, their tendencies, where they're going to hit the ball based on certain pitches. That's analytics, okay?
Yeah.
You don't think Tony La Russa used analytics?
Yeah,
and Dave Duncan. Tony La Russa, I seem to recall, won a World Series in 2011 because in the postseason, he fast-forwarded his bullpen into games, which is something no one was doing. He was like, well, I don't have as much faith in our rotation, but I love our bullpen. We're going to get these guys into the game earlier. And at the time, it was like, oh, what is he doing? Well, he was being smart. This is the kind of thing that someone in analytics would recommend to do. Go with your best arms. Don't worry about whether you're a starter or reliever. So, and I repeat, if you don't like analytics, then you're telling me that you also hated Jeff Luhnow's work in St. Louis. Because what do you think he was basing 90% of the stuff on, right? Including player evaluation. The other thing about it, and then I'll quit hollering after this, I'm actually in a good mood, is that do we agree? Do we agree that the Kansas City Royals had a nice season? I think they had a nice season. Yeah, they were able to beat the White Sox like 65 times or whatever, but I get it. They lose over 100 games last year, and this year they're in the playoffs. Why? Well, one of the first things that Piccolo, their new general manager, president of baseball ops, did, he went out and basically built an entirely new analytics staff, and they have one of the largest analytics staffs in the major leagues, and it's made a huge difference. Then he had to go choose a manager. Well, who did he choose as a manager? Wait, who is this guy? I never heard of Guitar. Who is this guy? Well, he comes from the Tampa Bay system, and he's a manager who believes in analytics and knows that it gives you a competitive advantage. And everything the Royals did is based on analytics, including hiring their manager, who is perfect for these times, even though no one ever heard of him before. And the other thing they did is they hired like 30 new people to bring into the organization in all these background rules to make them smarter collectively. So if you hate analytics, then if you're a Royals fan who hates analytics, then I assume you hate the fact that they're in the playoff. Or, all of the other things I cited. And, the other thing about Chaim Bloom with pitching, Tom Verducci wrote a comprehensive piece in SI a few years ago, and he said, the Tampa Bay Rays are the best in the major leagues. No one is even close. identifying, drafting, developing, and fixing pitchers. They are the model for that. And Chaim Bloom, in fact, got much of the credit for that. So people are going to sit here, well, what has he done? Okay, because he hadn't won a World Series. Well, when you win 96 games with Tampa Bay Rays on about a $50 million payroll, you have done a hell of a job. It's a miracle, even if you didn't win the World Series. All right, I'll shut up. Thank you.
No, it's all great stuff, and no question. Kevin, go ahead.
I say let's do this, because I think what we get lost on, and I know you guys, all of us know this, but the people that get mad about analytics and all that stuff, the new ways of measuring player performance, all you're fighting over is the language being used. Launch angle is what scouts used to call loft. They used to say that a power hitter has nice loft in his swing because he hits the ball in the air, because damage is in the air. Ted Williams 80 years ago was talking about you want to have a slight uppercut to your swing. 80 years ago. When we talk about the high spin rate fastball, that's what they used to call a rising fastball. We didn't have the tools to measure it, but it looked like it was rising, so we called it a rising fastball. That's just a high spin rate fastball at the top of the zone. All of these things have always existed. Major league teams have always emphasized velocity. Why do you think Walter Johnson was called Big Train? Because he threw hard. Like this stuff, it's just new words for the same ideas. And then what we have now that's so great is the ability to measure it. You guys all know this, but like there would be times in the past, right? I'll put it on Tony La Russa just because he's a great manager and one of the best baseball minds any of us have ever been around. But sometimes he would try to BS us a little bit when a hitter was struggling and be like, he's hitting a bunch of balls hard. They're just right at people. Well, now we know whether that's true or not, right? Now we know, was that ball hit 100 miles an hour? Oh, crap. Yeah, that was bad luck. But really, if we know, it was 78, come on, buddy, you can't mess with us. It's just that we now know the physical components that go into it because we can measure them. And that's all that's changed. The terminology and the tools available to us to measure these things. That's what analytics is. That and looking at large sample sizes of results and drawing conclusions based on that, as opposed to drawing conclusions based on the 3 games you had against that team earlier in the year.
100%.
If I can add to a couple things real quick. Like one of the things Marmol gets criticized for is because he uses so many different lineup combinations. Okay, number one, you had a lousy offense and you're constantly searching for something that's going to work. Yeah. I would be more bothered by any manager who's just like, you have a failing offense and you're just going, let it ride. Everything's fine. Let it ride. Let the boys stay where they are. And then the other thing, then I was arguing with someone online the other day. Well, he uses too many lineups. I mean, and that really hurts the team. No, the problem is they didn't have enough talent on offense. Here I go again, but the guy in Kansas City used many more different lineups than Ali Marmol did this year. Did you think anyone over there is belly aching about that? No.
Detroit.
Right, exactly. And then one other thing about launch angle. I hear this all the time. I'm tired. No wonder the Cardinals can't score. They got them doing all this launch angle stuff. Well, I actually did a very brief study on that this week. And the Cardinals, if they're making these guys do all this launch angle stuff, they're not doing it very well, because the Cardinals, in terms of the optimum launch angle, you want to be in a certain range, right? And you know what launch angle means? It means line drives, okay? It means I'm tired of them trying to hit home run. No, if you have a good, so-called good launch angle, it means you're hitting a lot of line drives. I was unaware that there was a percentage of baseball fans who were opposed to line drives. Yeah. I always thought that those things were good. But the other thing, the Cardinals' launch angle this season was terrible. So that's not in fact, you can make the case one of the reasons they were a bad offense is because they didn't have a good launch angle. They didn't hit the ball hard enough. Launch angle produces hard contact. Hard hit rates produce more slugging, more batting average, all those things. The Cardinals actually, whatever they were trying to teach with launch angle, they didn't get it done. The problem was their launch angle was terrible, not that there was too much of it. I just, this stuff's not that hard to learn. No. It's just not that hard to learn. Anyway.
No, Matt, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I harp on a lot is the aesthetics of the game in the 80s and 90s when you're stealing bases and stringing hits together and all that sort of stuff. I'll be the first to admit it. It was more fun and more entertaining to watch. The aesthetics of the game now is not as good as it was previously, but it's because we know more information now. We know what it takes to win games, and that's not what you do. I think a lot of fans confuse aesthetics of the game versus winning baseball.
Yeah.
And when you're a president of baseball operations, when you're a general manager and you're putting together a team and a style of play, your job isn't to create an entertaining style of baseball. Your job is to win games. And we get stuck in this thing where people always want to go back to the way it used to be because it happened to be a little bit more entertaining than many things that are going on now. And I think there has to be an understanding that just it won't work. And there's people who are listening to me right now yelling at their screen because they are convinced that it will work, but unfortunately it just won't.
I think the Cardinals could steal more bases, but
Sure.
then again, like they could take advantage of the new rules, and they haven't done that. But why haven't they done that? They're not athletic enough. And so there's no point in running into outs. Like Mason Wynn, I've heard a lot this year, as you gentlemen have. It's like, well, man, he needs to steal more bases. You know, he's fast. Who would disagree with that? Except late in the season, maybe this changed the final couple games. He had stolen 10 or 11 bases, but he had been thrown out 5 times. So why would you want him running into outs? I mean, it makes no sense. So, but they have not been able to take advantage of the new stolen base rules. I'm disappointed in that. But then again, they're just not a very athletic team.
Last thing before we go, and this could be a lengthy conversation as well, and it's the 2025 team specifically, because we know that player development is going to take at least 2-3 years to get this machine going to where it needs to be. We got that. It's a multi-year plan and all of that. But Kevin, you said something in the beginning that you don't think there's too much of a drop-off from this season to potentially next season. Let's look at personnel. What do you see there in this Cardinals roster?
Well, I mean, you'll have a full year of Fetty, who's better than Miles Miklasz, better than Lance Lynn, and better than Kyle Gibson at this stage. I mean, based on this season's performance, he was better than all those guys. So you'll have him for a full season with Sonny Gray. You can have Palante. You obviously have guys like Matthews and McGreevy. I mean, McGreevy's made, 3 starts in the majors, and every one of them was good. I think you have more upside in the rotation. Your bullpen, if you want, you could bring it back intact. You could re-sign Andrew Kittredge at a moderate salary and have the same quality bullpen you had this year, and it was a fantastic bullpen. If I look at the lineup, if I platoon, for example, Burleson and Baker at first, which I'm not saying they will or should, just saying if I did, I bet I get more production than I got out of Paul Goldschmidt. I think there are ways to have a better team with a lot of the same guys. And then, look, smart free agent signings, somebody that hits lefties that's going to play every day against lefties. Maybe Baker's too limited to be that guy, but I use him as the example. I don't think they maximized their team this year. Maybe get Herrera a first base club and make him that guy where he can play some first base and DH and catch once in a while where his throwing problems aren't going to kill you. There are a lot of ways where you can take what you have now with some very simple additions and have a much more productive and consistent lineup, because you're going to, and again, some of it's going to be like, can Wilson be healthy, right? If Wilson's healthy, not getting his arm broken on a fluke play, your lineup's better in the middle already. So I'm not saying that that's good enough. I want to be clear. I think they need upgrades. To me, they have to upgrade center field. If I'm saying there's one thing on offense that they don't have ready in-house now, is somebody who can play center that can hit a little bit. Because at this point, Siani and Scott are not hitters, not at the major league level. If I want to make this lineup better, I need somebody there every day that can hit at least a little bit, like league average or a little bit better. If I can get that, I think I can bring the other parts together with better instruction, more reliance on analytics, a better view. That was one of the big disappointments to me about yesterday, is I didn't hear anything about what they're going to do differently or better at the major league level to tweak a pitcher that's struggling and maybe change up their pitch mix. You can't add a new pitch in season very often, but you can stop throwing the ones that the other guys are hitting. You can throw them a lot less. Like, I pick on Miles Miklasz a lot, and I apologize, Miles. I'm sure you're a nice guy. But his pitch mix the last 2 years is exactly the same. about 27% four seams and 26% two seams and 25% sliders. It's not working. 2 years in a row, you're one of the bottom three guys in the league. Why are you not having a staff that would say, you know what, Miles, maybe we're going to change that mix a little bit. Maybe we're going to throw some more change-ups. I want to know more about how they can do that, because other teams do that. So, you know, like you'll see a team like the Dodgers, they get a player and he'll show up and they'll be like, wow, he's throwing like 60% fastballs. He was throwing 35% fastballs in his previous spot, and all of a sudden he's better. Sometimes it's that simple. We talk about the Rays a lot. You know, I know Pete Fairbanks has talked about this. Tyler Glasnow has talked about it. Those guys came from other organizations. The first thing that happened when they got to Tampa Bay, the Rays told them, hey, you got great stuff. You throw 100, just throw it down the middle. Stop trying to paint corners. Just throw it over the plate. Like, sometimes it can be that simple. And for Miles, my advice would be the opposite. Throw more pitches off the plate because it's not working. It's not working the way you're doing it. But I think this team could be better next year, even if the payroll drops $30 million.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It depends when they drop payroll. What does that actually look like? Is it some of these players, is it the Arenados and the Contrerases? If they get traded, then who knows? But if you replace Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson with some combination of Michael McGreevy, Gordon Graceffo, and Quinn Matthews, I don't think it's that much of a drop-off. And if anything, it's going to get better as the year goes along, as these guys continue to produce and do some things. So that's what I want to see the team do. And look, the heavy lifting is going to be going on with Chaim Bloom behind the scenes as they try to get this thing back rolling. But there are things that they can do to win at the major league level. Don't go sign a first baseman. Like Kevin said, you have Luken Baker, Ivan Herrera, Nolan Gorman, Alec Burleson. You got all these guys that you can go play at first base and take advantage of matchups and take advantage of who's hot and who's not at any given moment. I know going into this past season, they were hell-bent on defined roles for everybody. Drop that, at least for this year. Go with the guys that you have flexibility, and try on an everyday basis to put the best lineup possible. And if you do those things, I don't think it's much of a drop-off from last year.
No, I don't think so either. There wasn't really any talk, Bernie, yesterday about that. The players and the current players, of course, I don't know how much time they had to do it. They were talking a lot about what had just happened.
Right.
What do you think about the 25 roster?
Well, believe it or not, given the fact that I've been, spending a good part of 40 minutes hollering here, I don't have much to offer. And you say, well, why? Well, because I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do as far as pairing pay, and if so, who's going to go. Right. So it's kind of hard for me to handicap it. However, I'll say this: if they're convinced, or they believe, if they're having a come to Papa meeting about telling the truth and being realistic, if they don't see themselves as a playoff team in next season or in 2026, it would really be silly to not trade Ryan Helsley, for example. He's got 1 year left on his contract. What would be the point of having him doing an excellent job, but in a lost cause for the team's not good enough to make the playoffs? You could probably get a windfall for him if you trade him with 1 full year for his new team before he becomes free agency. And the same thing applies to like a guy like Kittredge. Katie Wu saying, well, they're probably not going to bring any of their free agents back, or free agents to be. The strength of this team this year was the bullpen. And I think their starting pitching, I agree with my colleagues and friends here, I think the starting pitching can be just as good, if not better, going with a younger group next season. But that bullpen was so strong about protecting the leads that they had. And they were so great in protecting leads when they were up after 7 innings, up after 8 innings. And Ali Marmol did a really great job of extending the bullpen by cultivating a guy like Fernandez, cultivating a guy like Liberatore, getting a lot more out of John King than I ever thought that they would. Those are just a few examples. So, but if you subtract the Helsley and you subtract a Kittredge, and you make, let's say, Fernandez your closer, the bullpen's not going to be comparable to what they had this season. And that could be a real problem in terms of how many games are you going to win. So I would just say that's the one area that I'm going to be looking at, because that bullpen is the reason why they won 83 games. If that bullpen had been mediocre, they would have had another 71 and 91 probably, or close to it. Anyway.
No doubt about it. I want to wrap it here. We've gone a good solid 45 minutes. There's so much more to cover, of course, but we will do it on air on KMOX, Sports Open Line, Chris and Amy, DGS. I'm on Total Information AM. This program can be watched over again on YouTube and other social media channels, and certainly YouTube is up and coming. KMOX Sports has its own page on YouTube, and I want to make sure that people, if they haven't already, where have you been? Subscribe to Bernie Miklasz' YouTube page. It's awesome. Yeah, make sure you do that. That's a Joplin hat too, isn't it?
It is 1950.
Yeah.
Joplin Miners, a Yankees farm team. The most famous player on the 50 Joplin Miners, Joplin, Missouri, Mickey Mantle, a teenager named Mickey Mantle. I had to buy this one, baby. I had to buy it.
You know how I learned that? From Bernie Miklasz' YouTube page.
That's right. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, make sure that you do that. It's really, really well done. I know we're going to get everybody out of here, but thank you for watching. Thank you for paying attention to KMOX. You know, we're going to be here all throughout. We're taping this on October 1st. Some of you watched it live, but this is just the beginning. This is a very important offseason, as you know, and we will be right at the heart of it. Not just us, but Mike Claiborne's going to jump in, Joe Pott. We've got a big team that is ready to give you all the off-season news you can handle. Every single day, Saturdays and Sundays as well. We don't ever close. For Bernie Miklasz, Matt Pauley, Kevin Wheeler, I'm Tom Ackerman. Thank you for joining us on the KMOX Sports social media channels.